The wind whipped across the canyon, carrying dust and dry leaves in swirling eddies that clung to Elena Marlowe's long, sun-bleached hair. The late afternoon sun burned gold across the rock faces, making the ridges shimmer like molten metal. She urged her mare forward, feeling every tremor in the narrow trail beneath her boots. It was a path carved by time itself, jagged and unforgiving, and she knew that a single misstep could send her tumbling into the abyss below. She had no choice but to follow it, though every instinct screamed at her to turn back. Her father was counting on her, locked behind the heavy iron bars of Fort Sutter, accused of a crime he hadn't committed. The marshal's rope would not wait, and the townspeople whispered that his life would be forfeit in 3 days' time. Elena gripped the reins tighter, her knuckles whitening. She had been traveling since dawn, her horse's hooves kicking up clouds of red dust that lingered in the heat. Each mile was an ordeal, the sun beating down mercilessly, her throat dry from the relentless wind that seemed to suck the moisture from her lips. But worse than the heat, worse than the aching muscles, was the knowledge that someone wanted to stop her. She felt the prickling awareness of eyes tracking her from every ridge and rock outcropping, a chill that belied the warmth of the sun. She had sensed it long before the crack of the rifle, the unnatural stillness, the way the wind seemed to carry an almost imperceptible tension. Danger had a scent she could not mistake, and it had been trailing her since the day she left her home. The sharp, sudden report of a rifle shattered the quiet, a thunderclap in the canyon that made her mare rear in terror. Elena struggled to regain control, but the animal panicked, stamping and kicking at the loose stones beneath its hooves. The trail narrowed, a mere ribbon of stone and dust clinging to the cliff's edge, and she felt the ground shift beneath her. Her boots slipped. Panic seized her chest like a vice, and for a heartbeat, she was weightless, suspended in a horrifying stillness as the canyon seemed to tilt and twist around her. She let out a scream, a sound swallowed almost immediately by the wind and the walls of rock that rose above and below her. The fall seemed endless, a blur of sky and red stone and fear. But just as the edge threatened to claim her, a rope looped around her waist, jerking her violently upward. Pain lanced through her body from the sudden tug, and she gasped, clutching at the coarse fibers that bit into her hands. Above her, silhouetted against the burning orange of the setting sun, stood a lone figure. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his eyes, but she could see the steel-gray glint beneath it, sharp and unwavering. Muscles taut, he leaned back on his heels, coiled lasso swinging with precision as he anchored himself against the cliff. The rope pulled her toward him, and the rough rock scraped against her palms as she struggled to keep hold. "Hold on, ma'am." His voice rang across the canyon, firm and commanding. "Ain't lettin' you die today." The words, though simple, carried a weight she had never felt before. Someone had reached into the void and saved her from it, and for the first time since she left home, she felt a flicker of hope. The cowboy's hands, calloused but steady, gripped the rope and began hauling her up. Each movement was calculated, every motion deliberate, as though he had done this countless times before. The dust clung to her skin, her hair plastered to her face, her heart hammering so violently she feared it might burst from her chest. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was a strange rhythm, the dance of life and death suspended on a rope over a yawning chasm. When he finally pulled her over the edge and onto solid rock, she collapsed, her body trembling, her breath ragged. She lay there, staring up at the cowboy who had just saved her, trying to comprehend what had just happened. For a moment, the world felt still, as though the canyon itself was holding its breath. The orange light of the dying sun cast long shadows, painting the rocks with streaks of fire and blood. And through it all, she looked up at him, the stranger who had plucked her from the jaws of death, and saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken: determination, strength, and the quiet assurance of a man who did not flinch in the face of danger. "Name's Colt Avery," he said, his voice steady, almost casual, though his eyes remained sharp and alert. "Saw ya topple. Figured I'd step in." Elena blinked, struggling to find words. Her throat was raw, her body aching from the fall and the jerking pull of the rope, but the most immediate sensation was gratitude, raw and overwhelming. I think you just saved my life," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Reckon so," Colt replied, tipping his hat with a faint, wry smile. But someone else seemed mighty set on endin' it. Elena followed his gaze and saw the ridge across the canyon, where the shadow of a figure disappeared behind a rock formation. Her stomach clenched. She had known there would be danger, but seeing it confirmed, knowing someone had tried to kill her, sent a shiver down her spine. They wanted to stop me, she said, her voice trembling. I'm trying to prove my father's innocence. He's to be hanged in 3 days, and I was on my way to Fort Sutter when. Her words trailed off as Colt crouched beside her, his hands brushing dust and debris off the rock as he surveyed the canyon below. There was a moment of silence, the kind that spoke louder than words, where they both seemed to measure the weight of what had just happened. Colt's jaw tightened. That was no stray bullet, he said finally. Someone wants you dead. Ain't happenin' by accident. Elena shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. She had been aware of the danger, of course, but hearing it confirmed made it real. Fear mixed with relief, the terror of near death still sharp in her veins, and yet the presence of this cowboy, this man who had appeared at the exact moment she had been about to fall, filled her with a strange, cautious hope. She had survived, and now, perhaps, she had a chance to save her father. I'm Elena Marlowe, she said, finally finding her voice, though it was tentative. And you've just given me my last chance. Colt's eyes softened fractionally, and he offered a hand, helping her to her feet. Well, Elena, looks like we've got ourselves a fight to the finish. I'm real familiar with trouble, and with handling the kind of men who cause it. His tone was calm, almost light, but there was steel beneath it, a promise that he would not let harm come to her, not if he could help it. She hesitated, the instinct to distrust strangers warring with the desperate need for an ally. But the canyon, the fall, the near-death experience, it all had stripped away pretense. There was no room for caution anymore. Will you ride with me? She asked, her voice firmer now, laced with resolve. I can't do this alone. Colt tipped his hat again, the shadowed edge brushing against his cheek. I'll ride with ya. I'll fight with ya. And I'll see you reach that fort in one piece. His gaze swept the horizon, as if already calculating the path ahead, the dangers waiting, the men who would stop at nothing to see her fail. But we've got a long ride ahead, and it ain't gonna be easy. You sure you're ready for it? Elena squared her shoulders, feeling a newfound strength rising within her. Tempered by the fear that had almost claimed her. I have to be, she said. My father's life depends on it. And I can't fail him. Colt nodded, respect evident in the tight set of his jaw. Then we ride. Sun's setting, and the night won't wait for no one. He mounted his horse with practiced ease, and she followed suit, her body still trembling but her determination hardened into steel. Together, they began their journey, the canyon walls echoing the soft clatter of hooves against stone, carrying them into the approaching night. As they rode, Elena stole glances at Colt. There was something about him, something steady and unyielding, that made her heart beat a little faster despite the danger. His eyes scanned the ridges and valleys, alert, calculating, always one step ahead. She realized that he was more than just a rescuer, he was a protector, a guide, and, perhaps, the only hope she had of reaching her father alive. The desert night descended swiftly, wrapping the canyon in shadows. The stars blinked coldly above, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and dust. Danger was still out there, lurking, waiting for the slightest misstep. But for the first time in days, Elena felt a measure of reassurance. She was not alone. She had Colt. And together, they would face whatever lay ahead, bandits, betrayals, or the harsh, unyielding wilderness of the Wild West. Hours passed. The moon rose high, pale and watchful, illuminating the trail as they rode in silence. Elena's thoughts drifted to her father, to the iron bars and the heavy chains, to the injustice that had been wrought upon him. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, but with Colt by her side, she believed she might just succeed. Every creak of a saddle, every whisper of the wind against rock, reminded her of how close she had come to death, and how miraculous it was that she had survived. Colt glanced back at her once, catching her eye. There was a silent understanding between them, a mutual recognition of the peril and the trust that had formed in the space of a single, life-threatening moment. We'll make it, he said quietly, more to himself than to her, but she felt the words like a shield around her. One step at a time. We'll make it. The canyon seemed endless, yet somehow they pressed on. And in that shared silence, broken only by the soft thud of hooves and the occasional distant howl of a coyote, Elena realized something profound. Sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes, a stranger can become your last chance, not just to survive, but to fight, to endure, and to reclaim what was nearly lost. By the time dawn began to lighten the horizon with pale streaks of gold and pink, they had traversed miles of rocky trails, leaving the danger of the cliff far behind. Exhaustion weighed on her, but it was a pleasant ache, the kind that follows hard-won survival. She looked at Colt again, catching the first hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Despite the dirt and dust, the grime of travel and the lingering tension of the night, there was a calm assurance about him that made her believe they truly could succeed. "Elena," he said, breaking the silence, "we're gonna get through this. One way or another. But we gotta stay sharp. Trouble's never far behind in these parts." His voice carried a firm kindness, a protective warmth that made her chest tighten with gratitude. She nodded, swallowing back the lingering fear, and felt a spark of determination ignite within her once more. The sun rose higher, spilling light across the canyon, revealing the rugged landscape in full detail. Jagged cliffs, winding trails, and the endless expanse of desert that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a harsh, unforgiving place, but it was also beautiful in its starkness. And for Elena, it was a landscape of second chances, a place where she had been given life when she should have lost it, and where she might yet save the man she loved most, her father. They rode on, side by side, the wind at their backs, the promise of a fight ahead, and the fragile thread of hope guiding them forward. And in that moment, amidst the vast, untamed wilderness of the Wild West, Elena Marlowe knew with certainty that Colt Avery, the cowboy who had saved her, was more than a stranger. He was her last chance.